Monster Hunter Wilds is live, and with it comes a wave of opinions on its difficulty. The big question on everyone's mind, is it too easy compared to other Monster Hunter games? My first playthrough was a breeze. No frantic karting, no sweat-inducing encounters, just smooth sailing. I went in with absolutely no plan, no route, and no prep, and I still was able to beat the game in just over 5 hours. But this got me thinking, could I possibly beat it with only the starter equipment? That's right, the Hope set and Hope sword you get at the beginning of the game? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to try and do. An entire campaign playthrough with nothing but the starter gear. No crafting, no upgrades, and no help. Just me and my Hope sword. I want to know if this game is truly worthy of the Monster Hunter crown. So here are the rules. I'll be playing solo only, no online co-op. Whatever weapon I choose at the beginning, I'm stuck with. I'll be using absolutely no mods and no cheats, and I can't use any NPC buddies' assistance. It's only me. Will it be possible? I'm not really sure, but I think this is the perfect test to find out just how easy this game really is. First up, we have Chatacabra. Now this fight is going to be pretty straightforward, as this is the standard way you fight him in every playthrough. I think this time I may have even gotten a personal best for a first kill time in a new run. As always, sharpness is already a problem, and now that I'm really paying attention to it, I'm starting to get a little worried for the rest of the monsters. But I'm going to clean up Chata quite easily and head to check on the others. After quickly getting acquainted with all of my guildmates at camp, I'm off to follow Yasai through the wild plains as he gets me used to the new environment. Once I'm back at camp and talking to Alma, we are stunned to see an SOS flare go off, meaning someone needs our help, and this is where our battle with Cumatrice begins. Now Cumatrice is a relatively easy fight even for the second monster in the game. I currently have a speedrun record of sub 1 minute on high rate Cumatrice with sword and shield, so I'm pretty confident going into this that I will make quick work of this monster. The only troubles I'm running into is the early need to sharpen my weapon, as well as making the mistake of not grabbing a flash pod early on to keep him from running away. But other than that, Cumatrice falls to the Hope Sword 1. Once I get back to camp, Yasai quickly leads me to the Windsong Village where I meet and sit down with Elder Ella. After leaving Windsong Village, it's time to head towards a new zone, the forest. Once there, we are tasked with following the tracks of a Dashaguma that we are looking for, but we end up finding a Lalabrina instead. Now Lalabrina is a fairly simple fight. My typical goal is to just attack the legs and try and use focus strikes on the wounds that I open up on them. My biggest struggle on this fight is still going to be battling how quickly I'm going through my sharpness though. We finally see the long-awaited Dashaguma show its face and get into a fight with the Lalabrina, which actually works out in our favor as it does quite a bit of damage to the current monster we're hunting. Later on, we end up getting a nice mount on the monster, which leads to knocking it onto the ground, and we're able to finish the hunt quickly after. After Lalabrina, we end up following the Linians through the forest to their home base, where we end up getting tasked with going on our next hunt. And this is where we meet Congalala. Now Congalala is the first monster that I predict I'll have a bit of trouble with. In general, he's pretty annoying with having both a front and back stink attack, as well as the gang of small monkeys that surround him can just make everything a little bit harder. But overall, Congalala still proves to not be difficult enough to stop the mighty Hope Sword 1. Immediately after fighting Congalala, we're off to hunt a Balahara. Now this is one of the more tricky early monsters to hunt, and because of that, it's the first monster that I'm considering capturing. What makes Balahara so tricky is that they are extremely long, and only really good place to hit them is the front of their face. Pretty much their entire body doesn't really take damage well. But eventually I'm able to use a guard slide up a small little lip on the ground, which makes me jump into the air and I actually gain a mount. And this mount is super important because once I use my finisher on the monster, he's going to be knocked down for a few seconds, which allows me to get some much needed free damage. And finally, after what seems like one of the longest fights yet, I'm able to dwindle down the Balahara enough to set up a shock trap and capture the monster. Coming back from the hunt with the Balahara, Windsong Village is being ravaged by a pack of Dashaguma, and it's our job to chase them out and finally put an end to them. Now Dashaguma is one of my personal worst fights in the game. No matter what, I just always struggle with it, and I predict this might be the first time I actually cart in the run. I'm definitely starting to feel the damage of the starter weapon as well. These monsters are getting stronger and stronger, but my damage numbers are really just staying the same. I get a quick bailout though as Balahara shows up and puts down some much needed damage on the Dashaguma for me. As the hunt progresses, I notice that it's actually going fairly well for me, and I start to think, hey, maybe I can get through this without guarding. I'm finally able to get some good use out of the environment around me as I call down some rocks on top of the Dashaguma's head, which not only knocks him down for me, but I also get a ton of free damage. If I'm being honest, I wish I saved my shock shock trap for this hunt, as it proved to last much longer than I think Balahara would have, but nevertheless, I'm able to take down Dashaguma without carding and I'm on to the next hunt. Which, speaking of our next hunt, we are about to come face to face with our very first Apex monster. Now, Uthduna is pretty interesting. She's covered in an almost armor-like water that you have to break in order to maximize your damage against her, but she also does extremely telegraphed moves that deal a ton of damage. Even though they are super telegraphed, I think most people still manage to get hit by them, or at least that's what I tell myself as I get hit by them. Somehow Uthduna is not only one of the biggest monsters in the game, but is probably the most acrobatic monsters, which just adds to the difficulty of the situation. But I try to utilize Sword and Shield's ability to strafe after every attack, as well as the super overpowered guard slide to dance my way around this giant monster without being hit. I originally planned on trying to capture this monster, but didn't realize that actually you weren't able to, and instead, the end of the fight is interrupted by a cutscene to signal the end of the hunt. And so we are now off to start chapter 2 of the campaign, and we start off by going to Azuz, the Everforge. As soon as we get to Azuz, our first hunt is against a Rompopolo. Typically, this monster doesn't give me too many issues, but this is a pretty big jump in difficulty from the chapter 1 monsters. If I'm being honest, I played this fight extremely greedy and took a lot of risks, and Rompopolo made me pay for it. As you can see here, Rompopolo is the first monster to make me cart in this challenge run, and it's really only because I thought I could avoid his mechanic by doing a back hop into the air, but ultimately it hit me and did about 1/4 of my HP. Other than that small hiccup, I was still able to take down Rompopolo in a respectable time. And now it's time for our Ray Dao fight. This is going to be a considerable jump up in difficulty in my opinion, and I think this will mark a new start to the challenge. Ray Dao has multiple abilities that hit extremely hard, as well as he can be quite annoying with all of his flying around. But I am able to utilize the rocks in the Ray Dao arena area to knock him down and do a sizable chunk of damage to him. I will say this fight is extremely dependent on being able to perfect guard for me, because a lot of his moves are super fast and can be pretty sketchy when it comes to just dodging out of the way. He does manage to get the best of me, as you can see, and kills me from about half health, which I really wasn't expecting. And unfortunately, this isn't even my biggest mistake of this hunt, because as you can see here, I obviously have a brain fart and forget that shock traps don't work on Ray Dao, and I simply try to capture him. That's not even mentioning that this is actually a slay mission anyway. I'm gonna blame this one on it being really late and a lack of sleep. Yeah, let's go with that. But it really only gets worse for me, to be honest. My food buff ends up running out, so I'm only working with a fraction of my normal HP. And let's just say I don't last very long with that going on. Yeah, I went from 0 carts to 3 in the span of 2 monsters. But I do manage to play the rest of the fight extremely safe and finally am able to take down Ray Dao. It wasn't really pretty, but a win is a win. After we clean up Ray Dao, Werner wants to have a word with us back in Azuz, where we end up going to start our fight with Nerscylla. Now Nerscylla always kind of reminds me of the Lullabrina fight. They have very similar models, and my strategy is generally the same. The only major difference is that Nerscylla will poison you as well as sleep you if you get hit. My first big blunder in this fight is that I forgot to get my food buff before coming on this mission, but I'll try and not let that slow me down. I do actually end up getting hit and put to sleep, and that's going to spell the end for my very first life in this fight. After respawning though, I do make sure to eat and restock all of my potions, because I know this is going to be a very long fight. The fight continues with me trying to avoid as many attacks as possible to keep the poison off, while trying to also get attacks in on her legs. I end up taking a very unfortunate hit, and as I'm in the animation of getting back up, I take another one, and I end up only having 1 life remaining for this mission. As I return, my goal is to play as safe as possible because I know this could end very badly, and I do not want to have to restart this fight over from the beginning. But as I'm in the heat of battle, a sneaky little sleep frog spawns and puts both me and Nerscylla to sleep, and we just end up kind of contemplating how we both ended up here in life for a little bit. But after a hard fought battle, 2 deaths, and countless health potions, I'm finally able to take down Nerscylla, and I'm really starting to notice an increase in difficulty now. And now it's time to hunt the most boring monster for Sword and Shield in the game. This fight is so boring because Hirobami just hovers right above you for the better part of 20 minutes while you hope that your short ass sword is able to scrape the bottom of its tail. Nothing particularly amazing happens during this hunt, but I do end up using a shock trap on it just to save myself from going insane from fighting it any longer. After the Hirobami hunt, I need to go find and talk to Werner in Azuz again, but it seems like we have a little bit of communication issues between me and him. I think he might be a little mad that I wasted so much time on Nerscylla, but we end up getting it figured out, and it's now time for my most hated story mission in the game, the double Ajarakan. Now Ajarakan is a lot like Dashaguma for me. I just simply can't understand how to get good at it. All of his moves just seem to have a magnet for my face, and I'm unable to dodge them, so I already know this is going to be a very difficult fight. Being bad at this fight, coupled with the fact fact that I'm constantly losing health from the heat of the zone, it's requiring me to constantly call my secret to come pick me up so I can health potion safely. Unfortunately, this fight goes as well as I thought it would, and I end up using my last cart at the very end of the fight when he was super low HP, so I've got to restart the mission over. And then finally, after 2 grueling attempts at fighting a Jarkon, I was finally able to beat him with only the starter equipment. And now it's time for chapter 2 of the campaign to come to an end, and for that, we must go fight New Udra, the Black Flame. Now, if you thought a Jarkon was a rough fight for me, then you have no idea what's in store with New Udra. This is my new mortal enemy in the game. I genuinely had a lot of problems with this fight. I'm at the point in the game where monsters are able to 2-shot me because of my starter gear, and unfortunately I'm not good enough at the game to do a hitless run, which means I either have to risk playing within 1-shot range or I have to constantly run away and drink a healing potion. But as you all know, there's only so many of those that I can carry. So I decided to do a mix of both, but it still cost me a lot of times. So you might be asking, how bad was it really? Well, let's just say it took me a full 4 attempts at this mission. That's right, I used a full 11 deaths before I was finally able to capture her with 1 life remaining. Yes! Freedom! No way it took me that many tries to kill this fucking boss, dude. Oh my god. And so finally, after completing the New Udra hunt, it's time to start the last chapter of the campaign, which means it's time for Guardian Dashaguma. Now, I already went over how bad I am at regular Dashaguma, and Guardian Dashaguma is pretty similar, but with a little bit more explosions and bigger AoEs. Oh, and he really hits harder. And if I'm being honest when I say this, it did not go well. I really struggled with this monster. I had him within capture range multiple times, so that's about 20% HP or so, but I was still not able to get the job done. But after countless deaths and multiple failed quests, I was finally able to beat this monster, and I've gotta say, this challenge is starting to look really hard. The last 3 monsters have been a huge jump in difficulty, and I'm now extremely worried about the rest of these hunts because the monsters only get harder. I mean, how am I expected to be able to beat Zoh Shia in the starter gear when Guardian Dashaguma is already giving me so much trouble? Either way, we must keep going, which means we have Guardian Rathalos up next, which I predict should be easier than our last fight, though Rathalos does pose some issues, mainly with his tendency to constantly move around and do his ranged fire breath attack, but hopefully my strategy of standing under his legs will be enough. Unfortunately, I quickly learned that it probably won't. Yeah, this guy hits really hard, and he quickly was able to cart me 3 times. I was forced to start again. After my first attempt with Rathalos went so badly, I did need to take a much needed materials break. I was running super low on honey for mega potions and needed to make a quick stop in the forest for a honey run, but after that I was back to the Rathalos fight. My second attempt at Rathalos seemed to go much better. I was able to get a lot of really good damage down with my strategy of standing between the legs, knocking him over to get a ton of free damage, as well as utilizing the terrain around me like this vine trap to yet again get a lot of free damage in and not have to worry about his attacks. But finally, after a grueling 14-minute fight with Rathalos, I was able to slay him and say I conquered yet another monster with the starter equipment. Now this is where the game gets fun. It's time for Arkveld. Now I know this isn't the actual full fight and it's just the repel mission, but I'm super happy to see a fight I finally know how to play well against, and I immediately can tell a difference as well. I've spent countless hours fighting Arkveld since the game dropped, and it really shows. There were a few sloppy moments here and there, but I mean, come on, give me a break. I just went 12 rounds with Guardian Dashaguma and Rathalos. Ultimately, this repel mission proves to not be all that difficult and is actually a breath of fresh air for me before heading back into the fire against some real monsters. Now it's time for what might be the hardest monster in this challenge run, Jindahad. Now what makes Jindahad so difficult typically is that he's just so large, coupled with the fact that you have to do some real mechanics in order to do the most damage to him. The way the fight works is you have to break the ridges on his tail, lower back, and head, and then you can break the ridges on his upper back in order to stop his big one-shot mechanic from happening. So I've got to do all of that while not getting one-shot by his multiple AoE attacks and super large hitboxes. My first few attempts do not go well at all. Jindahad is absolutely thrashing me around and there's not much I can really do about it. Unfortunately, I'm unable to do basically any damage to his ridges and they just won't break, so I've got to go back to the drawing board and figure out what's going on. On my third attempt at the mission, I make it a point to go absolutely ballistic on Jindahad's legs in order to break them as quickly as possible. possible. You see, if you can break his legs, he will get knocked over for a few seconds, which will allow you to get a ton of damage in on his ridges. Once I get to the third area, I know this is when the fight really starts. I've got all 3 ridges broken at this point, and all I need to do is break his back to stop his one-shot mechanic from happening. As I'm fighting him in this room, I'm making sure to utilize all of the falling boulders and ice that I can. You see, doing this not only does a ton of damage to the monster, but also lets me put in some much needed damage without being afraid of getting hit. But finally, after 3 whole attempts, perfecting my strategy and using every bit of environmental damage that I could, I finally am able to repel Jin Dahad, and it feels amazing. After the nightmare of Jin Dahad, it's time for a relatively chill monster in the form of Guardian Ebony Odogaron. Now this is one of my least favorite fights, not because it's hard or anything like that, but just because it's almost like Odogaron makes it harder by missing his own attacks. He's so fast and agile that when he goes to do a big attack and I plan on guarding it, sometimes he just kind of misses and goes past you, and it can really take you out of what's going on. I did struggle a little bit with a few deaths, but in the end I was able to slay Odogaron without failing the mission, which by the way is the first chapter 3 monster that I can say that about. And now we are getting super close to the end with only 3 monsters left. The third to last monster is none other than Zoh. There's not much to say about this fight in general, it's pretty simple, but it does have a few very hard hitting moves, and unfortunately I was a victim of them. The absolute worst one was its straight spear like attack that went through you like the Stingray did Steve way back in the day. And if you were lucky enough to survive the first one, well, guess what? There's a second one coming before you can even get out of the recovery animation, and then you're just dead. Though all this happened to me, I was still able to capture Zoh after just a few attempts of mastering it with the starter gear. And now we are down to the last 2 big boys of the game. And this is everyone's favorite flagship monster of this game, Arkveld. And I was super confident going into this hunt. I mean, I put in so many hours into this monster since the game came out. No way could I struggle with it, right? Well, let's just say no. I indeed did struggle. A lot. The thing about low rank Arkveld is that it just plays differently than what I'm used to. Its move sequencing is completely different, as well as how often he does each of his abilities. And anytime there's such a big switch up like that, it's going to throw you off a bit, or that's what I tell myself when I go to sleep at night. Ultimately, I had to utilize everything in my power to kill this monster. I got multiple mounts off, multiple power clashes, and probably hundreds of guard slide moves, but I was super determined to not fail this mission once and kill Arkveld within 1 attempt. And after a grueling 19-minute fight, I finally can say I beat Arkveld, but it's not over, and it's time for Zoh Shia. This is the last monster in this challenge run. Everything we've been waiting for. Now Zoh Shia isn't super complicated, but he does have quite a few mechanics involved, as well as a ton of HP. So I'm going to quickly break down how the fight goes. First off, it has what I like to call 3 different phases, as well as an intermission phase. In the first phase, the main goal is to hit its head and front 2 legs in order to break its armor. He keeps regenerating it, but ultimately you just need to keep breaking it while trying to dodge as much as possible. Eventually, you will deal enough damage to him that his head and wings turn black, and this is where he gains some fire attacks. He likes to shoot fire at the ground, and this does a ton of damage. I highly recommend avoiding this. Not like me, obviously. Then he goes into an intermission where he lights the entire room on fire, and it's your job to run all the way to the edge. In high rank, you can actually break some of the crystals and stand in the middle, but it didn't really work when I tried it here, so I guess it's not quite the same. And then lastly, in the third phase, he goes completely black and starts to summon lightning. Yeah, I'm being serious. He's a black dragon with white AoE energy that breathes fire and summons red lightning, and I have a Hope Sword 1. I mean, what could go wrong? Ultimately, I do my best to put in as much damage as I can. I call my secret over to quickly use health potions when I get low, and I'm trying my best to slide and strafe around the monster so that I can avoid as much damage as possible. I wasn't able to kill him in my very first attempt, but after an insane 24-minute hunt, I was able to complete the mission, and I can finally say that I beat Monster Hunter Wilds with only the starter equipment. And on top of that, I really enjoyed doing this challenge. I'd love to do more Monster Hunter challenges in the future, so let me know if you want to see more of these in the comments below. Later.